Hello. Hello, what is up, everybody? My name is Mario Picciardo. Welcome to another episode. Today, we got a couple news stories here for you. I already have the first one up. This is the Missouri legislature, which decided to pass uh, a bill, actually, here that is an abortion ban. I was reading through it. It's actually the first in a number, or not. I'm sorry, not the first, but it's one of many that's actually been coming out of a number of states here. Let me see if I can find the list of the guys here. It came right after Missouri. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the Missouri bill. It came after, I believe it. Yeah, after Alabama. Um, Here it says, oh, right here, it is Kentucky, Mississippi, Ohio, and Georgia have approved bans on abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected, which can occur at about the sixth week of pregnancy. So, this is something that's very interesting to see. Uh, because when you see a lot of the news and a lot of what the news coverage is today, you see a lot of, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Very, very kind of, pro, I don't even want to say women's rights because that's the kind of word speak. It's very uh, pro abortion. It's very pro, uh, baby killing. And that's a lot of what you see in the news. It's a lot of the propaganda you see in TV. Uh, and so, I have to say, praise God that there are people, out there who care about the lives of babies, of unborn babies. I mean, all of us were unborn babies at one point. All of us were 6, 7, 8, 9 months at some point, right? So, uh, it's a little crazy that, all of us who've gone through the same process are now saying, well, these babies shouldn't be able to follow that, kind of have their own shot at life, even though we had ours. So, what I thought was actually particularly interesting here was the way that it passed. So, here you can see that it says, like a mother in danger of dying or irreversible impairment of bodily function, but not in cases of rape or incest. In other words, the bill would allow for a mother who where her life is on the line. In that case, she'd be open to the opportunity to have an abortion, and she could also, in the case where there's a significant opportunity for some kind of impairment of her body. In other words, she has to really be, in some significant danger, for her to be allowed to have the abortion. A lot of abortion advocates usually say, well, what if uh, the, what if it's the result of a rape? What if it's the result of incest? Well, here we have our answers. A baby's life is still worth, uh, the life of any other child, regardless of the conditions under which the baby was uh, consummated. We see here that there's no real difference in how we're going to determine what a child's life is worth. And so this is great news. This is wonderful to see. I, of course, am pro life. I think that life is wonderful, and we should definitely respect and hold life sacred the way that, our original creator had taught us, had instilled in us, and shown us life. So, it's good to see that it passes here. Here it passes with a very, very large margin, 110 to 44. And, in no uncertain terms, this kind of legislation also tells you a lot about these states. The Missouri, the Alabama, uh, all of these states are clearly, on a more conservative slant, and that kind of gives you a little wink nod at what to expect from 2020 during the next election cycle. So, regardless of the things that we are seeing in the news or the things that we see in TV, that's heavily, heavily swayed towards a pro, abortion, pro progressive, pro liberal lifestyle, that is not reflective of the actual, rural American, and certainly not most of suburban America. Usually the liberal concentrations happen to be in the, especially hyper liberal, end up being in very urban environments. So, there is a lot more of America that we don't, while we may not see a lot in the news, it's still there, even though it's underrepresented. Remember that most of society is silent. They're the silent majority, and they don't, get up with their microphones and declare their political affiliations or their ideas on abortion. Those are the kinds of people who are your average everyday Joe Schmo. So, there's a lot that we're not really hearing about or seeing. And I think that this bill being passed in Missouri is a step towards traditionalization, a reintroduction of conservative values in society. And I think that that's something that is absolutely wonderful to see and that we get to see. So this is our first story here. Let's go on to the next one. Here we have a story about Theresa May, who is seeming to be in a bit of trouble in Brexit right now, concerning Brexit. She has, interestingly enough, so Theresa May is under a lot of backlash because her deal, quote unquote, her Brexit deal, is absolutely atrocious. She is one of these establishment types straight out of Brussels who wants to separate Britain from the EU only under the condition that the EU actually still has power over Britain in terms of its trade. And not only that, when Britain leaves, it actually has no authority to stop the EU from kind of doing whatever it wants in terms of trade with regard to Britain. And so, that just being a little slice of her deal, Theresa May really brings out this horrible future for Britain that actually went to, the British Parliament, and they voted on it, and every single time her deal was completely voted down. And that's because the people realized, hey, this is not a deal for the British people. In fact, this is a horrific deal. We're not going to take it. We're never going to accept something like this. It's not a good idea. And, it kind of really shows you what side, people are on with regard to nationalism or the belief in bettering your own country. A lot of these globalist types are very nationalism. They're very focused on, okay, well, we need to do what's best for the entire globe. And usually what that means is that your society starts to really struggle, and the people that that voted you into office really suffer. They end up not being able to pay their rents. They're able to not, they end up not even being able to afford gas in some cases. I mean, look at the riots that were happening in France. Look at the Yellow Vest protests in France. And you kind of see how bad things can really get. So, Theresa May is certainly not having a good time of it. The article kind of goes through and it explains, just how bad things really are for her. It's explained in no uncertain terms that the people around her in her own party know that she's out. It's just a matter of time. They even say, she's delaying the inevitable. It's over for her. So, it's interesting as well because, like we're seeing this bill pass in Missouri for abortion rights, or I'm sorry, for the ban of abortions. We're also starting to see abroad a kind of resurgence of conservative values. And it's not just happening in Britain. We're seeing other countries expected to have a blowout in the EU parliamentary elections. For people who are saying, we're fed up with these kind of globalist policies, these policies that favor the elite, the establishment, and really and cause a lot of suffering and pain for the average everyday people of the very same nations that they pay taxes for, the society of whose establishment elitist politicians have turned their backs on. And so, it's no wonder, it should be no wonder to anybody why all this stuff is happening, why people are really so disenchanted with the left, with all of these establishment politicians here. So, Theresa May, it looks like she's on her way out. It really doesn't look like she's going to have a lot of time there. The Brexit party is expected to win in the polls, or expected to win pretty big. So we'll see where that takes us in the future. Which reminds me of the fact that the Italian kind of conservative party had recently had its Facebook pages taken off ahead of their elections. And so that's, in no uncertain terms as well, we have to look at that and say it's a bit coincidental that this happens so close to an actual election cycle where this party can really be a threat to the establishment, and kind of say, well, if this is really happening here, we have to look at it for what it is and really start to question, do these governments, or it's really not even the government, do these tech companies hold too much power where their authority allows them actually the opportunity to overturn democratic elections? That is by definition election meddling. And so we kind of have to figure out what we're going to do there, because that's a very scary thought. In other words, it doesn't matter who I vote for or who you vote for. Let's say, Hillary got elected in 2016 and all the votes were rigged. This is something that we're seeing very comparable to that. And then I'll tell you, that kind of stuff is bound to bring riots, but not if the people feel like it was the majority opinion in their own country. Not until things get bad enough that people really walk out on it, like the Yellow Vests are doing in France. So here's our second story. I mean, you kind of also start to notice a trend as you see the one back to back here. Tensions are really escalating between parties, and that'll be a nice segue into our next topic here. But you're really starting to see this kind of escalation in terms of the conservative side, the groups that are more focused on family values, on the valuing of life, on real representation for the average everyday person, really making a resurgence back into the limelight of politics, of policy, and so it's excellent to see. I think it's very exciting to see. It really shows you, hey, people are fed up. They're done. They're ready to get for change to happen. And so here's our next guy over here. Trump. This is out of the New York Times. Trump walks out on Pelosi and Schumer after 3 minutes. So here we go on, and this one's a very interesting article. It's kind of talking about how essentially Trump is completely fed up with the investigations post Mueller report that the U.S. taxpayers spend $40 million and counting on, and they continue to rehash not only the same story, but to interview people that we've already gone through this process. And so Trump is frustrated, and rightly so. He wants to get, I think a part of Trump thought that once this thing was over, once the Mueller report came out, he could get back to, getting into the office, showing people that he really is a great president. Now that this thing's behind him, he can focus on campaigning. He can focus on, making new policy, making new legislation. I think he maybe even might have thought that he would have gotten a little bit more support from Democrats. But really what he's starting to see is that things are just getting even more heated against him. But he is winning in a way, because when you really think at it, there's nothing that Democrats can say about Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is that regardless of what your opinion on the man is, so much time has passed. So many opinions have been shared about the president that there's really nothing to say about him. There was this guy who I think he was like a filmmaker or something. And he said if Donald Trump gets reelected, it'll be the end of democracy. And it's like, oh, we've never heard that one before. This will be a brand new, oh no, we got to stop this. Listen, there's nothing you can say about the man that hasn't already been said. There's nothing that's going to happen to Donald Trump. Not at this point. I mean, the Mueller report came out. The collusion wasn't there. But they keep going, and he's frustrated. The man's over it. He's saying, he's literally saying, we're not doing anything until, you stop it. Now, I don't know how well that really bodes for the country. We clearly have a very serious condition, a very serious crisis at our southern border. I think we now have the highest concentration of illegal immigrants that we've ever had in the history of the United States at the southern border. And if you want to talk about an overwhelmed guard at the southern border, I think there was over 55,000 or more migrants all at once being housed. And, this is something that we're talking about. We're just a couple months ago where President Trump was asking for more funding for the border wall. The only thing that the Democrats really agreed to give him was a little bit more money to fund illegals in these houses, not to put up a better wall, but to take better care of illegal immigrants when they already came over. And so, there's a lot of this. If this keeps going on, which I'm sure that globalists and a lot of other elites would like, because you see that when you kind of import so many, especially so quickly, so many illegal immigrants, they don't have American rights. They're not entitled to American rights. And so what you're able to do is you're able to start to undercut Americans for jobs that, Americans would otherwise have. Instead of paying, a wage of, say, $15, $16, $17, $13, $12, or $10 to an American, an illegal will make $6 or $5. And, rightly so, as the business owner, you want to make as much money as you can. You want to have competitive prices. You want to open yourself up to other markets. You want to make more money, essentially. And so, it makes a lot of sense to hire illegals if you can. There's a great incentive to. And I think a lot of the elites see that, and they say, well, if I could cut my annual operating income by, say, 15, 20 million, just by importing a couple tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, and I won't really even need to survive with the long-term consequences of what will happen, because I'll be set and so will my children. Well, there's really not, you really don't have anything other than a moral duty to really do better. And if you're not a very moral person, it doesn't matter in the first place. So, it's very interesting that, a lot of people, particularly on the left, will go out there and say, okay, well, we got to take care of people. We have to do a better job of taking care of our own. Except that's not what they say. That's what the right says. The left says, we have to take care of everybody. We have to be moral. It's racist to kick people out. Just completely detached from reality in terms of understanding that every society, even the United States, one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest country in the entire world, that the entire world has ever had at any point, has a finite number of resources, that can dry up very quickly. Many countries who've gone to war, many countries who have, spent themselves into oblivion, have completely collapsed as a result of the financial situation that they found themselves in, as a result of taking on more responsibility or too many tasks at a time when they bit off more than they can chew, so to speak. So, to see this kind of thing is very troubling. I think that if you're an American citizen, I don't know how you can't look at these actions by Democrats, look at something like the Mueller report, really kind of educate yourself on the topic and look at what William Barr is saying. I believe his first name's William, the Attorney General, and, look at the things the Attorney General has said, where he came out and he said in Congress, I do think spying occurred by President Obama and the Obama administration, against against President Trump, against an actual citizen. He engaged in, campaign espionage in that way, which is a felony. And that, the whole claim is that, well, it looks like the Mueller report was really a part of an attempted cover up, because the idea was that Hillary Clinton would have won in 2016. And that's kind of why you see so much ire against Trump, because these people claim to believe that, that they're going to be imprisoned if Trump were to kind of have free reign as president. And so they kind of come in with all of this artillery to take him down, using all of these kind of news organizations and public figures, celebrities, to suppress him, and we still see that today. And I think the really interesting thing about it is to kind of look at how is the average American really responding to this as it's happening. A lot of people really aren't doing anything about it. Or I'm sorry, not that they're not doing anything about it, but a lot of people are starting to realize that things are not what they're being told that they were. And that's why you're, for example, starting to see a lot of people migrate. There's a mass exodus, as there's always been. I mean, there's always been a precipitous drop off in the number of people who've went to CNN, of the number of people who've went to the Wall Street Journal, who've went to the Washington, all of these different organizations that are now going to Breitbart, and they're now they're going to all of these kind of right-leaning sites. A lot of them aren't even going to cable anymore. Fox has the highest, I think, ratings of all the cable networks right now. But it's also, Fox is also seeing a decline overall. I mean, they're all really seeing a decline. And that shows, the trend that people are following is towards independent media, is towards sources that they feel like they can trust. That's why people like Tim Pool have so many viewers, particularly in the key demographic. I'm sure part of that has to do with the fact that, well, these people are people who grew up a lot sooner on technology. And so they're used to kind of getting their news on demand, having the large amount of choice, the large amount of options. And so there's a part of that there too. And so that's really what we see here with with Chuck Schumer and with Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump. I would not be remiss that the public understands at this point what's going on, that it's really all one big game. And, if I were Chuck, if I were Nancy, uh, I would really start to pay attention to that. I don't think that the public are stupid. The power of BuzzFeed, the power of the New York Times, the Washington Post, so on and so forth, has precipitously and continues to precipitously drop off. And the time is coming, and I'll tell you, the time is coming when people will shut their doors on cable news, and they're going to be looking at the independent sources. And that's probably also why you see a lot more censorship, particularly around this campaign season, from your Twitters, from your Facebooks. These people understand the trends, and trust me when I say there is a huge, I believe, support that for not only Donald Trump or the right wing, but conservative and conservative values that really is starting to emerge and starting to bleed through. Because people realize that it's all a game. People want to have their voices heard. They're sick and tired of it. They're sick and tired. So here's our fourth story. This one's out of BuzzFeed. Out of Fox News about BuzzFeed, which is actually very interesting, because this story is actually claiming. So essentially what happens is BuzzFeed writes an article, and in their article they're claiming that Tony Robbins had inappropriate relations with one of the women at his seminar, but also that it's happened a lot before, inappropriate relations with various women, that he's made advances that were unwelcome, so on and so forth. Now, the interesting thing about the article isn't necessarily the BuzzFeed report or the news about Tony Robbins. It's the backlash against BuzzFeed for publishing the story. So much so that BuzzFeed had to make a statement about the backlash after their primary person, the primary woman that they were writing about, actually comes out and completely refutes the story that BuzzFeed is saying that, hey, BuzzFeed, and she says this in the video. She has a video linked here to the article, where she kind of gets behind the camera herself and explains how great Tony Robbins has been in influencing her life and helping her to pick herself up from the ground. She details how she wrote a book and became a best-selling author, so on and so forth, and it's completely changed her life. And then what really happened was that BuzzFeed called her up, already knowing the story that they wanted to write about Tony Robbins. And really what happened is that when she kind of said, no, that didn't really happen, well, BuzzFeed kind of still wrote the story, the narrative that they wanted to push anyway. And so, I thought this was really interesting because this really even just goes right into what we're talking about, where cable news, these major organizations, BuzzFeed, even all these online sites, they're dying because they're not really telling people news. It became a lot more about activism than it did about, doing the right thing, telling real news, breaking real hard-hitting stories. A lot of the news now is about outrage. A lot of the news is about anti-Trump, anti-conservative, pushing, pro-trans agendas and things like that. And so we're really starting to see that. I mean, this story, as soon as I saw it, I said to myself, I'm not really surprised, and I'm not surprised because they've been hammering this stuff home day in and day out, and people get sick and tired of it. People really do, and they're really burning their own credibility, I think, at a rate that they don't really recognize. And so, this is what's happening to BuzzFeed, and the New York Times is down under. It doesn't make any money. It hasn't been making money for a while, but the reckoning is coming. Kotaku, gaming website that became activist, it was really hurting, whose valuation completely dropped off. Vice had a similar issue. A lot of these websites are kind of like falling apart. A lot of what we're starting to see now is this kind of drop off People are waking up to what this news really is and what this news is really all about. And so, that's really all that we have here for in terms of stories. I did see that this had happened. There was a shooting at a bar. 12 are now found dead. Oh, it was at a nightclub, Thousand Oaks nightclub. Um, this kinds of when things like this happen, I mean, all you can really do is pray. Pray and really, for the families, for the victims, that this kind of thing won't happen again. But a lot also of what happens, and I think we're all kind of it's kind of normalized at this point. Listen, we're so used to, unfortunately, we're so used to shootings, as tragic as that sounds, that it doesn't really kind of hit home anymore. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, what else is on? And that's really sad. It really is. So God bless and pray for these people. But we all know what's going to happen is that it's immediately going to become political. Just like it did in New Zealand, people are going to push. The prime minister, I think, immediately after said our gun laws will change. That was her immediate statement. And we're going to see something very similar. People are going to make another call that we need more legislation against guns, regardless of we don't really need time for grieving. And something very similar happened at another. I think I forgot the word, but it's when people stay up in commemoration of someone's passing. And some Democrats took it upon themselves. Oh, it was a vigil. I think it's called a vigil. Used it as an opportunity to kind of get up during the vigil and kind of talk about in front of the group why we need stronger gun laws. And a lot of the students saw that, and they were so frustrated because they saw politicians taking advantage of a very tragic accident where I believe the child, the person who died, actually sacrificed their life so that some of those students could survive. And so it was a very heroic act, and it immediately turned political by these Democrats who clearly are just so out of touch with their own constituents that, well, for one thing, that's very concerning because you're a politician, right? And your whole job as a representative is to relay and to act within accordance of, well, what you think is the best course of action for your constituents while holding their values and voting on legislation and so on and so forth for them, advocating for them. And to be someone who cannot at that same time really relate to the struggles that your people are having is very concerning, I think. And so there's a lot. This is for those of you who are watching. Well, actually, you guys may not be able to see this. I'll put it up on the screen. I'll switch cameras so you guys can see it. But this is the police officer that died at the bar. And so, pray for him, pray for his family. Sergeant Ron Hellas died. So, very tragic accident. Yeah. And so, that's really all we have here today, guys. I did not have as much time as I wanted to get more stories up for today, but I'd rather do something than to kind of let the time just go by. So if you guys like the video, be sure to smash that like button. If you guys love the video, be sure to smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so that you're notified the next time we make a video and it goes live. Also, don't be afraid to comment or share your opinion. It really helps with the searching algorithms on YouTube. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.